Hello, hello, and welcome to another forecast. This is our second of two eclipses. It is the Libra eclipse. And this eclipse is quite an interesting eclipse, really. It is conjunct Black Moon, Lilith, and Mercury. So we're going to have a little bit of a look at what that means in a moment. But remember that I set up the chart for South Africa. This is on the 2nd of October. Let me double check that. 2nd of October, that's right. And I've set this up for South Africa. So in this particular chart, we have Taurus on the ascendant. But just think about it being Aries on the ascendant, or more importantly, just look at it where it's your chart. So Aries on the ascendant would be the natural order of a chart, natural chart. Or you could set it up for yourself. Or more importantly is to notice, do I have any planets or points that connect to the places that we're talking about today? So do you have anything around 10 degrees of Libra? And I would say you could easily go to 6 to 12, 13 degrees of Libra. And not only Libra, but the other cardinal signs as well, because the cardinal signs will then be impacted in a slightly more crunchy way, might be a little more tricky. And so the other cardinal signs would always be the opposite sign, which is going to be Aries, or the signs at 90 degrees from that sign, which we would be looking at Cancer and Capricorn, which are obviously opposite one another. So those are the four signs that you'd be looking for the end of the first decan into the first decan, a second decan. So decan is a 10 degrees sort of section. So yeah, I would say you could easily really go from 5 to 15 degrees of those signs. And that's where we've got Sun, Moon, and Lilith at the same degree, 10 degrees. And then we've got Mercury at 11. And the node is, as I say, it's still looped in here. Now, that is actually why this is an eclipse, because this new moon is happening near the node. And in this case, the north node. The south node. And that means south node is about releasing, shedding, letting go of. Now, Libra is the archetype of relationships. It's the more one-on-one intensive relationships. The other air signs, all air signs are relational and about connection and the human element. So the first one is Gemini, and Gemini is going to speak more to sibling relationships, your neighbors, your cousins, your playground sort of connection. So it's where we first start to learn how to connect and the people in our environment that we connect with. The second air sign is the one we're talking about today, which is Libra, where it's where we begin to develop much more intense, intimate relationships. So that is oftentimes a romantic partner, but it can also be a business partner or a best friend, more one-on-one dynamics. And then we have the third air sign, which is Aquarius, and Aquarius speaks more into the group or into the collective. So, if you're a part of any groups, associations, societies, etc., or the whole of the school or whatever it is, it's the bigger group of connection. So of those connections, probably Libra is the most intensive in the sense that it's like eyeball to eyeball. It's not talking to a sea of eyeballs. It's you connecting with one person, and it's usually somebody where you are looking for more of a intimate connection. And because this is at the south node, we will probably be thinking about what of those types of relationships in my life right now are not feeling balanced. Libra is also the scales, and it is all about trying to achieve a certain balance. And relationships should be balanced. It should be a reciprocal thing. I help you, you help me. I love you, you love me. I support you, you support me. And whatever way that shows up, like if it is in a business partnership, maybe I work for you and then you pay me. Or in a romantic relationship, you're like, it's got to be, I can't be doing all the work in this relationship and you're getting a lot and I'm not getting anything back. So, take the particular relationship and ask yourself, whatever is the sort of rules around this type of relationship, and how do I want this to feel more balanced? And where is it that I just can't get there? Because it's an eclipse. It might be those relationships that you've tried and tried and tried and tried. And now you go, you know what, we can't work together anymore. Or this is not a healthy friendship, or this is a toxic relationship. And so I wouldn't be surprised to see some relationships falling away. Now, this is, or at least the sort of final nail in the coffin, because sometimes with eclipses, this is the point at which this really is initiated. Like, okay, you know what, you do that one more time and I can't stay in this situation. And then of course the one more time might happen in a week or in a month or whatever, but you meant it when you said it at that eclipse. And that is basically that seed point of the end of a relationship, for example. And don't panic, not everybody's relationships are going to end. Maybe they end as they were. Maybe it's like a hard line in the sand. If you do that again, this relationship isn't going to work. And maybe the other person doesn't do it again. Maybe they go, oh my gosh, this person means it, and I've got to, that's it. I've got to change my ways. End of story. So maybe it's actually just the beginning of a new relationship with the same person. So don't panic, but also if it is your relationship and it is like an intimate relationship or any of those like really devastating things to lose, trust me, I know, you know, try to remember that this is actually in your greatest good. It's happening for you and not to you and to the other person. Because when we get locked into these unhealthy, imbalanced relationships, they're actually not good for anybody. Not for the person who's receiving excessively, not for the person who's giving excessively. They're not good. A healthy relationship has reciprocity and balance. Okay. That doesn't mean that it's always that way. There's an ebb and a flow, but the overall image of that relationship needs to be, you can fully trust that that person is hearing what you're saying. You can be yourself fully with that person. Obviously, that's a bit different maybe if it's a business relationship, but you get the idea. Okay, so this is also intensified, aside from that South Node, as I mentioned, by Black Moon Lilith. And Black Moon Lilith is a point rather than a planet, the point where the moon is furthest from the Earth. So our last full moon, or our last few full moons, were supermoons. And when the supermoons are at the full moon point, when they're on their side furthest from Black Moon Lilith, then they're closest to Earth, which means that our last few new moons, certainly this one as well, and I think it's the last one and the next one, are going to be like micro moons, smallest, furthest from the Earth. So that's just a little interesting thing. But what Lilith represents, aside from the fact that she's not a physical point, is Adam's first wife. The myth of Adam's first wife before Eve gives you the understanding of where that goes. And Adam's first wife basically was a rebel. So she decided that she would not be subservient to Adam. She would not lie beneath Adam. Again, interesting that this is a relational dynamic and a power over, because she was told basically that Adam is on top when they are breeding the race of humanity. And she didn't love that position of being disempowered. It felt out of balance to her. So Lilith rebelled and she left Eden, and she went and she tried all sorts of crazy things, some of which she certainly would have been shamed for, even in this day and age, probably. And ultimately, she became a shaman and she developed the ability to shapeshift. And when she had done this deep alchemical transformation of herself, and she felt whole and healed and in both her internal masculine and feminine parts, she decided maybe she was ready to have a relationship, and she was going back to Adam, her husband. But of course, when Lilith got back, Adam had replaced her with Eve. And so then she just tried to caution Eve as she transformed herself into the serpent and met Eve in the garden and said, listen, you don't have to be subservient. You don't have to keep your eyes closed. You don't have to be blinded for the rest of your life. And she offered Eve the option of the apple, which in the way that we've all pretty much learned the stories was like the end of the world. Like we could have lived in paradise, but we chose to see. And I feel like that's very indicative of where we are now, because we could pretend to keep our blinkers on and pretend that the things that are happening in the governments and the way the world has been run and big pharma and all of that stuff, we could pretend that that is not happening, and we could stay in paradise, or at least paradise for the few, for the chosen few, or we can eat the apple and we can get real and we can go, crap, that's uncomfortable. I don't like dealing with that. I don't like looking at that. I hate what I'm seeing, but that is the truth. And so Lilith really initiates this, activates this energy. Again, remembering we're putting it right there with the new moon, where we have these new seeds and plant these intentions, and sun and moon are right together in the sky, and they're there with that South Node, and they're there with Lilith. Relationships are going to change, end or change, or transform on some level nonetheless. And then, of course, we've got Mercury here as well. And we know by now that Mercury represents the way we think, our mind, the stories we tell. So again, maybe it's like, why have I been doing this in my relationship? Why do I always think I can't give my boss my opinion just because my boss is my boss? Now I think maybe that there's a power over me dynamic, therefore I must bite my tongue. But actually, I have ideas too. Or why in my relationship do I never stop to listen to what my romantic partner has to say? Why is it that I always think that they're stupid or airheaded, or they don't know what they're talking about, or whatever it is? We're going to have these reflections of, hang on a second, maybe I've been looking at this all wrong, or maybe the story I've been told, the way I thought I had to be, maybe that's not true. Remembering we've also just undergone that Mercury retrograde not so long ago, and so we're still, I feel like we're still very much processing what came up for us in that retrograde. I mean, it's a little way off at this point, but I always feel like there's this unfolding after we get out of the shadows, where we still have this like background awareness because of all that like retrospectiveness. Suddenly, as we move forward, it's kind of like you start seeing things you may not have seen if you hadn't just had this big reflection. And I feel like this is still quite present for us at this lunation, especially because Mercury is right there. He's just been in the heart of the sun, which is a Kazemi, just before this lunation. So he's suddenly gotten out in front of the sun, and he's heading out, but he really is. There's a lot of light. He's invisible in the sky now, but there's a lot of light. There's a lot of illumination from this dark moon time. Okay, so that's all happening on this side of the chart in Libra. And then on the other side here of the chart, we have this dynamics, something that's going on for a little while. It's going to go on for a little while because these are the outer planets and they're slow. So I'm mentioning it in more than one of these forecasts, but I want to point it out again. And it's really quite a, for me, I love this. Okay, so it's two of the outer planets, Uranus in Taurus, linked by a trine to Pluto, who's currently back in Capricorn for very short. He's about to turn around and head back into Aquarius, and then that's it for Capricorn. This is like really the end of his Capricorn story. In November, he's moving out. Okay, and then we have them linked by sextile, both of those by sextile to Neptune in Pisces. So those are all the outer planets. And for me, it's as if they're holding us like a net. They're holding us in these archetypes, these that are saying, okay, we just want to give them the space to go through this transformation and change, because we are going through a transformation and change. And because these are favorable connections that these planets are making with each other, instead of Pluto being at loggerheads with Uranus or Neptune, it's as if these outer planets, these kind of like slow giant energies, even though Pluto is small, he is mighty. The slower the cycle, the planetary cycle, the more intense the impact of the planet. So Pluto is powerful. He is intense. Neptune is also very intense, like waves of change. And then Uranus is like dynamic, shocking, also intense. So instead of any of these three intense, powerful, potent energies being aggressive or pushy or bossy or argumentative with one another, they're saying, let's team up to create a net, because there is enough crazy in this world. There is enough challenge and drama for the poor little humans down there, that at least if we can create this net for a while, it'll give them a container within which to grow through the pain. And remember that lovely saying, there's no growth in the comfort zone and there's no comfort in the growth zone. It's like they know that. They know we're all damn uncomfortable right now. So they're like, well, let's throw them a bone. And they're doing this beautiful thing that they will be doing for a little while, because they're so slow that when they're in these kind of connection points with each other, it takes a little while for it to move on. And then I also want to talk into this beautiful trine, grand trine that we have here in water. So you can see this nice, neat little triangle linking Mars in Cancer and Venus in Scorpio and Saturn in Pisces. So again, this is two malefic, two challenging planets. The cold, slow, rules-bound, time-bound, constrictive Saturn in the watery, sensitive, emotional realms of Pisces, forming a happy conversation, a trine, a graceful, jubilant trine to our Mars in Cancer. He's also not super. Neither of these planets love the sign they're in right now. It's both a bit more challenging for them to be in. Mars is going to be doing his retrograde here, so this is quite powerful. He's here for a good long while, and he only retrogrades every 2 years. So we are really feeling our way into that right now. But Mars in Pisces, it's like, this little fireball trying to operate underwater. It's not an easy thing for him. So he's feeling more emotional than he likes to feel, because he's a bit of like a warrior energy, and it's better for warriors to be able to just act sort of impulsively and just do what they have to do rather than get all like soft and mushy about it. And of course, he's quite soft and mushy right now. But there's a balance happening here between the sort of hot and the cold, the run at it and go slower kind of energy. And they are at the other point of this, we have the benefic Venus in Scorpio. And I feel like Venus is really holding some important place here. Scorpio is Mars's sign, so he can kind of support her as she supports him. There's a bit of a vibe going here because there's not mutual reception. They're both not in each other's space, but he's supporting her, but I feel like she's in a way holding the space, because in Scorpio, Venus is quite fierce. She's got this fierce depth and intensity and courage and strategic application. And it's as if, to me, that, and I think just also remember, like with astrology, it's very much like each person, there are certain things that, you have to learn, but also a lot of it is intuitive. Well, certainly for some astrologers, myself included, a lot of it's intuitive about what resonate, how that chart speaks to you or sings to you. And for me, Venus is really like cracking a bit of a whip at these two to help them find their balance. Now, remember, this is a Venus-ruled new moon, because Venus rules Libra and all these guys we talked about earlier from the space of Scorpio. And I kind of I see her dressed in leather, leather pants, leather corset, whip in hand. And she feels to me like she is keeping everybody in line here with like scrutiny and precision. And I don't think it's a bad thing. Even though this is not her easiest place to be, I feel like she needs to bring the fierceness, which for me also links in a bit to Lilith here, and that fierceness of Lilith. And so I do feel like there's this fierce power to transform, and a reminder that this is a positive thing. Now, of course, we do have all of these planets forming a square Mars. So there is a little bit of a like, I don't know how to do this differently, because Mars wants to get it done. And here they're all thinking about, well, hell, these relationships aren't working. Something's got to give. Something's got to change. How do I act differently? Now, ironically, because Mars is in this soft and squishy sign of Cancer, and don't worry, Cancer's got some fierceness in itself at the best of times, but Mars definitely feels like this is not fierce enough for him. Thankfully, he's getting a bit of support from a fierce Venus. But I think, he's squaring off here. But what the answer is that Cancer is a nurturing sign. It's a mothering sign. It's a water sign, so emotionally based. And I think that the answer to the change, even though Mars feels it's a little counterintuitive, is compassion. If we are wanting to get out of certain relational dynamics, we don't want to get out of them aggressively. We don't want to like burn down bridges. We want to try and reflect that getting out of any kind of relationship, whether it's unmeshing from a romantic relationship or a long-term friendship or a business partnership or whatever it is, it's hard. It's hard for both parties. And if we could do that, Mars, in a more compassionate, nurturing way of the other Libra stuff and self, then we would be doing it in a way that is honoring. So even though this is a square, which is a little more challenging, for me, I think that's what the key is. It shouldn't be aggressive. It shouldn't be vicious. It can be supportive. And for the most part, I just feel like this is a really positive, and compassionate chart with some fierce. Like the lessons are going to be clear. They're going to be fierce. They're going to be like, this is the thing. Sorry if you didn't like it, but this is the thing. But at the same time, there's a lot of positivity for me in this chart. And then I didn't really speak much into Jupiter. He's still in Gemini. Let's just leave it at that. He's not really speaking very strongly to any of the planets in this particular forecast. So we'll leave it at that for now, or it might get a little too overwhelming. But thank you very much for listening. And I very much appreciate your likes, shares, follows, subscribes, etc. And I will be back to share another forecast with you soon.